Here we go. At our church, Jesus is Lord. That single belief calls us together as a community and sends us into our world with hope and purpose. At our church, your past will never define your future. There's always redemption, which means there's always a brighter day. At our church, we don't think we're better than any other church out there. We're just doing our best to become our best. At our church, we want you to believe in God, but we also want you to know that God believes in you. We are not against people who don't attend church anywhere. Instead, we pursue them with love, the very same love that's pursuing us. At our church, we're learning to serve God with all our hearts, and we're learning to worship Him with all our lives. And if you're looking for the perfect church, we're not it. At our church, we will make mistakes, but we will choose to grow from them. At our church, we're part of a global community that's knit together by the resurrection of Jesus. And by the way, at our church, we believe that really happened too. At our church, we will engage with people who are in real need because we are the hands and the feet of Christ. And finally, we need you to hear this loud and clear. At our church, it's not really our church at all. It's His. And we live and move and breathe in His church for His glory and His fame, not ours. So here's the invitation. You're invited to jump in with your whole heart at your own pace and to experience the life that awaits you in Christ. Friends, this is going to be good. Welcome to our church.
We're going to turn to the Gospel of John, the first chapter, as we conclude our Advent sermon series on Not That Far from Bethlehem. John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through Him all things were made. Without Him nothing was made that has been made. In Him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified concerning him. He cried out, saying, "This is the one I spoke about when I said, 'He who comes after me has surpassed me, because he was before me.' Out of his fullness we have all received grace in place of grace already given. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in his closest relationship with the Father, has made him known." And all God's children say, Amen. Today is really just a short meditation for all of you on this passage. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Over the past couple weeks, we've talked about this Advent wreath and what each one of these candles represent. The candle of hope, the candles of peace, the candle of joy, and today we lit the candle of love. Amazing love has entered into this world and continues to enter into this world. And yet, though the world was created by this love, though the world was created for this love, the world does not recognize this love. Indeed, many of us who have gone to church all our lives may not recognize this love, may not recognize the significance of really what happens at Bethlehem. Yes, we sing the songs and we talk about it, but do we recognize the true significance that the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us? Why did God come in such a fashion? Why did the incarnate love of God manifest himself in a simple, tiny baby in a stall in Bethlehem? Why? In order to understand the question of why, we actually have to go back to Genesis and understand this, that we have a perverted and distorted view of God, and we have a perverted and distorted view of ourselves because of that. You see, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And that Word decided to create. Didn't just create the heavens and the earth, but created the pinnacle of all of the creation story, was man and woman dwelling together with God in a union, in a relationship, because God wanted people that would choose to love him, that would choose to want to be with him. God wanted a family, and so he created a family. But that family began to have a distorted view of who God was right off from the beginning. Because the serpent comes in, and the serpent tests them. Now God puts two trees in the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life. And he says, you must not eat from this tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But the serpent comes in and puts in this question mark about who is this God? Who is this God who created you, and what's this all about? And the serpent makes it clear to these people, hey, you know what? If you eat of this fruit, you'll be like God. You'll be like him, knowing good and evil. You'll be equal to God. And so they took of that fruit, and they ate of that fruit, and they were expelled from the garden. But from that moment on, God had a plan in place to bring back his family. Because the problem wasn't that they ate of the fruit. The problem was they had a distorted view of who the Father was in the first place. You see, they thought that if they ate of the fruit, they could be like God, because they thought God was this great big cosmic powerhouse. Great big cosmic Shylock demanding his pound of flesh. I had a friend a couple years ago say, I don't understand you Christians gathering around singing about God. Why does God require that of his people? God doesn't require that of his people. It would be the natural response to understanding the amazing grace and the amazing love shown to each and every one of us. You see, we thought God was this great, big, powerful thing that we could obtain, that we could be like, because after all, that's what happens right after the Bible. Right after the fall, we continue to try to be like God. We continue to try to live like God in our view of God. You see, God created us in his image, but sometimes we return the favor and we try to create him in our image. We try to recreate him in our image. And so you remember the story of the Tower of Babel, where they tried to build this great big tower to get up to the heavens because they're going to show what the people, can do apart from God. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not overcome it. Time and time again, the people try to become like God, try to become powerful. But in God's kingdom and in God's economy, and the Word becoming flesh demonstrates what a perverse view of who God is that we had. Because the Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us. The Word, love itself, took on a face. Because it was one thing for God to talk to us. It's one thing to God to send prophets to us. One thing for God to give us scriptures and all these things. But you know what? We still had a distorted view. Today, we still have a distorted view. And because of that, we don't understand the true significance of the incarnate nature of God taking on flesh. Not just taking on any flesh, but being born in the midst of a scandal. Being born in a cattle stall. There were no great trumpets. There were no kings gathering there immediately. There wasn't this royal procession. Rather, it was a mother, a father, some sheep, some cattle, and some shepherds that eventually came to celebrate that birth. That birth that even today we fail to understand the significance. That perhaps God isn't about power. Perhaps God isn't about the grandeur. But perhaps the whole purpose of this story was for God to show us who He was, who He continues to be in the Word made flesh. The Word that became vulnerable and lived among us. The Word that lived in poverty with us, that lived with the exiles, that lived with the foreigners, that went to the woman at the well. The Word that broke down the barriers that we sought to divide ourselves. Just as we sought to divide ourselves from God, we seek to divide ourselves from one another. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us and destroys those barriers. Continues to destroy those barriers. Jesus came to show us the Father. This is what it says in Colossians 1:19. For God was pleased to have all His fullness dwell in Him, and through Him to reconcile to Himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through His blood shed on the cross. If you want to know who God is, you look to Jesus the Son. But think about that. That's not what this world reveres. This world reveres power, bluster, might, strength. That's what we look for. But that's not what God seeks after. You see, think about the bookends of Jesus' life, His physical life on earth. The beginning was in the manger, in the cattle stall, and Jesus chose to spend His last day washing feet. From the very beginning, God humbled Himself and became obedient. Jesus became obedient even unto the point of death. He who was the Word that created everything washed our feet. He who was the Word that created everything dwelt among us in that manger. Love truly does have a face. You know, I had a lot that I was going to say today, but I want to end with this. And this is a poem entitled "The Manger of My Heart." Because God chooses to still wash our feet, chooses still to dwell in the mangers of our lives, because we do a pretty good job of creating cattle stalls in our life. Listen to the words. This Christmas, Lord, come to the manger of my heart. Fill me with your presence from the very start. As I prepare for the holidays and gifts to be given, remind me of the gift you gave when you sent your Son from heaven. The first Christmas gift, it was the greatest gift ever. You came as a baby born in a manger, wrapped like the gifts I find under my tree, waiting to be opened to reveal your love to me. Restore to me the wonder that came with Jesus' birth when he left the riches of heaven and wrapped himself in the rags of earth. Emmanuel, God with us, your presence came that night. And angels announced, into your darkness God brings his light. Do not be afraid, they said to the shepherds in the field. Speak to my heart today, Lord, and help me to yield. Make me like those shepherd boys, obedient to your call, setting distractions and worries aside. To you I surrender them all. Surround me with your presence, Lord. I long to hear your voice. Clear my mind of countless concerns and all the holiday noise. Slow me down this Christmas. Let me not be in a rush. In the midst of the parties and planning, I want to feel your hush. This Christmas, Jesus, come to the manger of my heart. Invade my soul like Bethlehem, bringing peace to every part. Dwell within and around me as I unwrap your presence each day. Keep me close to you, Lord. It's in your wonderful name I pray.
Here's a few reasons why people don't go to church.
I can't come to church until I get my life together.
Church is how I got my life together.
Church is filled with a bunch of hypocrites.
And there's always room for one more.
All they care about is your money.
They care about me, not about my money.
Is there some kind of dress code?
Yes, the code is wear some clothes.
Church, it just makes me nervous.
I was nervous at first, and then I felt right at home.
I'm not sure I believe everything that you believe.
But you can still belong.
Church is for wimpy, girly men.
You want to say that again?
If you knew me and what I've done, you wouldn't want me.
If you knew me and what I have done, you wouldn't be worried.
You can come to my church even if you were brought up Catholic,
Baptist,
Methodist,
Jewish,
Mormon,
Lutheran,
Pentecostal,
Presbyterian,
Church of Christ,
Southern Baptist.
a little bit of everything and a whole lot of nothing.
See, it's not about a religion, it's about a relationship.
So please, come to my church.
Where nobody's perfect.
Where beginners are welcome.
Where socks are optional.
but grace is required.
Where forgiveness is offered.
Where hope is alive.
And where it's okay to not be okay. Really.